Winging It F1 podcast. Freddie's already laughing, so that's a good sign. It's our Australian Grand Prix preview. It's the first time F1 has gone down under since the last time F1 went down under for the 2022 Australian Grand Prix. It's already that kind of episode, and I love it. But to join me through that episode is Freddie, and the man who was the student faculty leader for mathematics when he was in either school or sixth form, Nigel Chew. Nigel, how are you feeling to have had that revealed to the world?
I forgot I told you. Oh yeah, I told you that last week.
Yeah.
I feel delighted that you've told the world that. And yeah, it was in high school in year 11. So yeah.
Well done.
Freddie, do you regret that you weren't
it's the biggest achievement in my
faculty
life.
leader?
For mathematics, no, I was in set 4, so it would have been a bold choice to put me so high up in the maths game that early on.
Well, there we go. But we will move on swiftly to
because the maths I can do means that I can count that 1 is above 4 in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4 for that kind of thing. Even though 4 is above 1 anyway. Nigel, help me.
It feels quite cruel that they make the lower sets the higher numbers. Well, I guess then that's teaching you what 4 or 5 is, or 6, depending on how many sets you have. We only have 5.
Well, who finished 20th in the Saudi Arabian qualifying? DeFries? Sargent. Well, Sargent, based on that logic, if the higher number is the best, then Sargent qualified the best for that race. So,
well, there we go. But Sargent was not driving a McLaren. The 2 drivers who were driving McLaren will be under new technical leadership after McLaren announced that they had let go of James Key. I forget the official denomination that they gave the parting of ways, but yeah, they are moving on. They are basically accepting that they need to have a change at the top of their technical structure. They brought in David Sanchez from Ferrari, who left pretty suddenly from a team who is also having a bit of a technical doubts going on, if rumours are to be believed, coming out of Italy. But Nigel, I know this is something that you've been tracking and talking about for a while, so I'll give you the first go on this one. What was your reaction to the news?
My reaction was to write an article for Total Motorsport, which is what I've done, to go and read that. But I also thought it was kind of interesting that even before pre-season testing, we all kind of weren't that optimistic about McLaren, and we all know, the drivers have talked about who've driven for McLaren over the last 3-4 years, Sainz, Ricciardo, Norris. They've all talked about a strange car or a unique driving style, and to have that over 2 different regulations in 2021 then 2022, I think that's very interesting in a way that's kind of happened, and the kind of blame, if you have to use a word, does go to James Key, the technical director, who's been there since 2019. So I think, considering McLaren before the budget cap didn't have the big money of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, they did very, very well. But I think Zak Brown kind of thinks James Key isn't good enough to get McLaren back to the front. And this season, to me, it seems like they've set their targets too low in terms of the downforce that the car can produce, and that's what it lacks at the moment. And also, it's very inefficient. I mean, the drag in Saudi Arabia was absolutely horrendous, quite frankly, against the Williams when Norris and Piastri were battling Sargent. So I think this season, the combination of the McLaren car not being that easy to drive has kind of led to this move, and I think it is the right move. For me, James Key just wasn't quite good enough to be the person to lead a McLaren back to the front.
Ready?
We can end the podcast there. To be honest, that was quite. No, I agree with Nigel. I think this concept for McLaren is the first sort of officially James Key led McLaren since ever, and because when he came in sort of mid to early 2019, I want to say, they'd already built the car that was laid the groundwork for their pretty decent 2019, 2020, and 21, because they were all essentially the same car. 20 and 21s definitely because of the COVID regulation continuation. And first time of asking, it's not really worked, and it's not shown many signs of fruitful development. And as Nigel said, so it seems to be, it's kind of like, yeah, we need to rejig this a bit. But what they've kind of done is they've gone back, it seems, to what they had under the Ron Dennis regime, with a sort of a flatter structure of different technical directors across the board, as opposed to an all-seeing technical leader. And it's like they're doing everything they can to not say the word matrix, which is what Ron Dennis coined back in the day. It's like, oh, it's the matrix structure. Everyone's all this kind of stuff. We've got a modern conglomerate structure for a modern conglomerate team, which McLaren used to pride itself as. And I don't know, it seems to be like there's sort of a pattern now with teams that seem to go from fits and starts between we need a traditional one technical director to we need a team of leaders. We need one director, team of leaders. It seems to be that they go between each one. McLaren are on this phase, and then in 4 years' time they'll be on a technical director on their own again, and then in 4 years after that they'll be back to 3 leaders, and so on. I mean, I don't really know what works. It seems to be that some things work in some organizations, some things don't. It's essentially some teams have designed a good car and some teams haven't. I don't know if this rejig will change anything. I don't have much faith in it, because the amount of times we see this in F1, as I was just alluding to, is 10 a penny. So what will happen? No one knows. And it's a long time for this. It's another thing, another excuse for McLaren to kick down the road, isn't it? We're waiting for the wind tunnel, which they've now opened. We're waiting for the improvements. We're waiting for the new regulations. Now waiting for the next set of new regulations. Now waiting for next season, the season after that. It's now waiting for this person to join and this person to finish their gardening leave. And so it's like, oh, okay, cool. What are we waiting for now? 2050. My goodness me.
Well,
Yeah, pretty much.
like,
No,
it
became a
is,
slate. I didn't mean to. Sorry,
it
McLaren.
is
I
gonna
like
be-
McLaren.
no, it is going to be 2025 at the earliest, probably 2026, because David Sanchez is only going to join next year. So then that's next year's car will have nothing to do or not much to do with him. So then it will only be the year after when the wind tunnel is properly up and running, because I think it only gets going in June, and that'll take time to kind of correlate as well. So we are talking minimum 2 years for McLaren to even think about getting back to the front, I think.
Yeah, it is just really frustrating, and for as Freddie kind of alluded to there, like for fans, then it's a team that a lot of people want to root for. It's quite it's a well-liked neutral team. Obviously, they've got Norris there, who a lot of people like, and Piastri as well, who's won himself a lot of fans with his exploits. So there's a lot good around the team, and that's just what makes it so frustrating. It's one of the biggest names in Formula One, but it's just so frustrating when they can't keep it all together and they can't get a good run for more than a few seasons, because they did have real momentum in 2019 and 20 especially. After that third place, kind of against the odds, especially from the start of the season in 2020, then it was really looking really well set, and it has just slipped away from them really. So yeah, like you say, it's just really frustrating that now we're going to have to wait again. And I don't know, like Norris at the start of the season, then Norris was saying he thought it'd be 2024 when McLaren start to see their gains coming to fruition, and he was happy to, or at least publicly, he was happy to write off 23 and look to 24. But now if they're kicking it to 25 at least, or 26, I can't imagine he's going to be happy with that. And I think there'll be a lot of rumours coming out over potential departures to various teams starting, imminently.
But then again, on the flip side, of saying, oh, we need to focus on this and that, what recovery plan can we see? Aston Martin have laid the groundwork for teams to make a jump, and if something does click in, if things do work, there is the potential to make a jump. So on the flip side of that, there is a level of, well, make the attempt, make the jump to make a change and just throw something in there and just get on with it, because a jump is possible in this era of Formula One in a way that probably all of us thought wouldn't happen in that way with Aston Martin over this off-season. Yes, with various bits and pieces and design ideas that have transferred between people, but you can take the designer, and if he's got the ideas, he's got the ideas. So I'm referring to Dan Fallows there. And if that's just the way to go with it, then why not take the push? And there is that. I think that's a level of optimism to look at this, that I think we're right to be cynical of everything in this regard, but Aston Martin have given us have given everyone a leg to stand on, to sort of look to quite a close future and hope for a good upturn in fortune.
Ultimately, it's
I
just all
think
about the people in those roles. Like, you know, you said there, Dan Fallows, obviously Red Bull have finally got back to the front under, you know, one of, if not the greatest technical minds in F1, and, you know, Mattia Binotto led Ferrari's resurgence after 2020. Like, it is, in a large sense, it is all about, you know, just getting a good person and finding a good person and hitting that jackpot. So it's, you know, like talking about structures or whether there's one person at the top or several, or, you know, it's less about the structure, more who works within it and who's, you know, who can they get and can they get the right person to it? Because Dan Fallows is, you know, what really, really, you know, what he has achieved Aston Martin already is remarkable. But, you know, it's not, you need to, you know, be a good enough technical figure for that fundamentally. And, you know, McLaren have brought James Key in, and unfortunately it's not worked out for him and for them.
I think what's interesting is over the last, to me, 12 to 18 months, there's been more and more talk about technical people moving and designers. And I'm kind of glad that is happening, because ultimately F1 is mostly about the car, not the drivers. Yes, the drivers are the big stars, of course, but really more media attention and more attention in general should be put on these design people. And I think that's really interesting that has come to light, you know, over the last 1 or 2 years. And McLaren now, with this restructure, we should be asking, and obviously it's impossible to know, because you know, technical people is not like a sport where you can analyze the, I guess, performance. Yes, you can look at the car, but to pin that on one person or 100 people is impossible to say, I think. So I just think that kind of aspect is interesting as well. You know, how many important people does it take to, like, I guess, get to the front? Because Aston Martin have taken one of Red Bull's top aerodynamicists and one of Mercedes as well, and that has got them to the front. You know, so yeah, I just kind of find that fascinating, really.
It's also what they wanted to achieve with the budget cap is, you know, Dan Fallows has gone from being head of aerodynamics at Red Bull to a technical director at Aston Martin, you know, which will have a higher pay packet. So it's all about balancing that. And it is, yeah, as I say, that's one of the things they wanted to achieve with the budget cap is have a, you know, make it easier to have that flux where, you know, Red Bull now can't afford to be paying their head aerodynamicist the same as a technical director, someone else, or if they can, then it means they have to make savings elsewhere. So it really mixes in all of that, which I think is interesting and shows that, fingers crossed, it's working. But yeah. I didn't know if Freddie was going to jump in there, but I feel like we've got to the end of that topic talking about McLaren. But one team that was linked with McLaren, or one brand that was linked with McLaren but now won't be joining F1, is Porsche, depending on where you're from. They were linked with Red Bull last season, and that fell through because they wanted too high of a controlling stake. Freddie's put his hand up.
Is Porsche or Porsche regional?
I kind of meant internationally.
Oh, okay.
I don't know which is the native though. I got Porsche.
I've always
said Porsche.
I say Porsche.
Oh, it must be a north and south thing again.
I said Porsche because I switched between,
because
I just thought, well, they know more about cars than me, so they said Porsche. That's what I went for. But I mean, both are fine, aren't they? So.
Yeah, well, I flip him.
Porsche's definitely the right one.
Right.
I don't know which one you said.
Porsche.
Okay.
Anyway, they're not coming to F1.
Think that.
Discuss.
They're not coming to F1? No, they're not. They were very much trying to have their cake and eat it, weren't they? They never really committed massively. It was, oh, look, they basically wanted to do what Ford have done, but with a bit more kudos and a bit more power, which is take over an existing powertrain company, which has already started doing their own work, which has levels of Honda already involved as well. And they weren't prepared to front for their own engine, and they weren't prepared to do that. So it's kind of understandable that it hasn't worked out. It was quite a half-baked proposal. Unlike their sister company Audi, who are a sister company but very different, as I think is something you have to say if you talk about Audi and Porsche on a podcast. You have to declare that they're the same parent owner but very different. So take that off your bingo cards, lads. They've come in it with a full on like works team focus with preparation and quite a statement of intent, whereas that just wasn't there with Porsche. And to be honest, they don't need to. They've gone for the full Le Mans program. They're at the front in Formula E. They've been at the front in pretty much every GT series for forever. So, and they're continuing to fund that with a lot of panache. And it's just never really worked, Porsche and F1. So apart from when they weren't called Porsches and they were called tags in the mid-80s, it's fair. It's kind of, it's kind of always doomed to failure. And that seems to have been what's happened. And I'm not that surprised.
Take that off your bingo cards. Lads really got me there. No, I'd have to.
But ages ago, you're still
I
laughing.
think.
That's good. I'll add that to my stand-up set.
I can't wait to see the set.
It'll probably be a podcast I have to do on my own because you two aren't around.
Porsche. Yeah, I think it's a shame for F1 because having a big brand manufacturer like that would have been amazing. And I do think F1 is in this bit of a golden era in terms of a boom of teams and manufacturers of what, we could have a 12, 13 car grid if the right people are in charge and F1, and if that's what F1 wants. But I kind of feel for Porsche, it's a bit of a blessing in disguise almost, because F1 is very political, let's say, in my opinion, and ultimately there's usually maximum 2 or 3 teams at the front, and to be one of those 2 or 3 teams, you have to spend a lot. And yes, we've got the budget cap, but you also have to get the right people in place, and I think that's very tough to do. So that's why linking up with Red Bull or McLaren was the right thing to do, but they couldn't make the right agreement in terms of the structure, so that it just never happened. So yeah, it's a shame, but already I'm not too surprised. But I do feel it's now not going to happen. Well, for another 10, 15 years possibly.
Yeah, that's what I forget if it's Porsche or VW, but yeah, one of them said that was kind of that was the opportunity, and then it goes away for another 10 years, and then you get a chance to come back in, or it has been a bit longer. Freddie, do you think it will be, do you think Porsche will regret it, or do you think they will see it as, I mean, I know you alluded to their success in other motorsports, because I'm kind of, obviously at the moment everyone wants to get in F1, but that also means you're kind of buying high at the moment, and then if it doesn't go south in 5 or 10 years, then you'll be selling low. So, but equally, it is a chance that doesn't come around very often. So where do you kind of sit between those two camps?
I think, as has always been the case, F1's never been the be-all and end-all. I think, yeah, it's a fantastic pie of a piece of at the moment, but I think Porsche have done fantastically well without it. They don't need it. None of the car companies need it, which is why F1 plays to them so much. But it's just kind of like, I don't think it's that bad or a big deal that it's just not worked out. It's just, it could have worked out. Each party sees the pro of the other. Few things didn't happen, didn't go in the best possible way. They weren't fully committed. They were trying a bit of a half-ass entry anyway, and oh well. I kind of see with the future of it that this is the closest it's been. It's a shame it hadn't got over the line, but I can't only think of I can't think much to say about it anymore, really, apart from that's it.
Well, there we go.
I feel like 10, 15 years is optimistic for the conversations to reignite, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible to say what's going to happen, isn't it? But yeah, I don't know. Porsche, I mean, I think it goes back to what you said. Porsche and F1, it just never has been a major relationship, not like Honda, for example, who, yes, they've been in and out of the sport, but they've had their spells, I guess. So that just comes. It's just part of the culture, I guess. And some car manufacturers are like that. It's the same with, I don't know, BMW, perhaps. Just thinking of random manufacturers. So yeah, shame it didn't happen, but it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much interest in F1 right now, and yeah, it would be nice to see still, but we shall move on. And one of the teams that Porsche were linked with were Red Bull, who had Dan Fallows. But where did Dan Fallows start his F1 career? At Jaguar. Who drove for Jaguar? Mark Webber. Where's Mark Webber from? Australia.
But he lives in the UK.
What F1 Grand Prix is it this weekend? The Australian Grand Prix. Who's going to win it? Is there going to be a battle? What are we going to see? What can we expect? Will Aston Martin win it? What's going on?
That's a lot of questions.
Mark
Pick and
Webber is
choose.
from
Verstappen.
Canberra, isn't he?
I think he is, yeah, Canberra.
Because he's the Canberra milk kid.
Is he?
Anyway,
Have you seen that advert?
I've not
You haven't seen the
that.
Canberra milk kid
No.
advert? Oh, it's
No.
Mark Webber in about 2009 singing a song about milk. And he's just at a kart track, but it's in somewhere probably like Basingstoke or something random. And he just stands at the side holding some milk. It's great. It's a fantastic advert. I urge you all to watch that. Also, Fernando Alonso could win it. As we all know, he was so phenomenal and should have been on the front row, and it was the best ever qualifying lap that wasn't completed ever, and all of that kind of stuff last year in the Alpine. So maybe he could win it. But what? I don't know. I think Red Bull are quite good at the moment, but I don't know what I'm basing that on.
I think this track, out of most of the tracks this year, considering there's going to be 4 DRS zones, I think, around Albert Park, which is like 60% of the circuit. And Red Bull found some trick, which I'm still trying to work out. And I forget
Triple
what I'm trying
DRS.
to work out. Yeah, well, yeah. Apart from the people who are around Red Bull, how they're finding more top end speed by opening that, that's going to be a massive advantage this weekend. So I
Impressive.
fully expect a 1-2 in qualifying and a 1-2 in the race. The only thing is if there will be a battle between Verstappen and Perez, who, for me, it's just all about the start. What I will say is I find it interesting. I think I read they've swapped the pole position and second place starting grid boxes. So pole position is now on the dirty side of the grid inside. And it would be absolutely amazing if Verstappen's on pole on the right hand side and Perez jumps him at the start. Because then there'll be some kind of like beef going on, I think.
Well,
so
it's full on Jean-Marie Balestre, isn't it, this now?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, the Japanese Grand Prix in 1990 between Senna and Prost.
Yeah, at least it's not done
Senna
between like in more announced circumstances, such as the final race. But that's an interesting thing. I hadn't realized that, and with it being a street track, I guess that makes a lot of difference. But there's a big old support structure. F2 and F3 are there. I think S5000 are there as well. No supercars this year, which is a shame because that's always a cool thing for the event.
There is supercars.
Oh, there? Oh, cool. Yeah. I read the wrong article then. No, well then fantastic. There's such a big support series
huge
structure there that I think, it's probably going to be fairly clean still anyway.
Yeah, should be. But
have you seen
it would be quite funny if go on.
Oh, it was much less intended. But have you seen the video where they set off the F1 car, a road car, and a V8 supercar, and they time it differently? It's at the Melbourne track, and they time it obviously staggered, and they cross the line.
They did it at Phillip Island as well.
It's really, really close. It's really good. So I recommend people watching that as an Australian thing. I missed the first half of Nigel's analysis because I was watching the Canberra Milk Kid video, and it is absolutely fantastic. So I can second Freddie's thing to go and watch it. I mean, the
only reason I know Mark Webber's from Canberra.
In terms of this weekend, I think, it'd be great if Perez can challenge and we can have a battle at the front, or if any of the other teams can. But it's already
Perez can challenge from fourth because he has a bad qualifying and he gets he's got third. No, that won't be good. That'll be boring. Carry on.
I was just it's already getting a bit tired. Maybe the people F1 and Sky Sports already trying to big up either Aston Martin or Perez as being like the big title challenger this season, and kind of like, oh well, we could have a battle. When I just really don't feel
I
like.
don't think anyone's really going. I think I hear more people saying that they're bored that people are saying about it than actually saying it.
I feel like I've seen a fair bit and not really
Fair
anyone
enough.
else being bored at it. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if there is a battle, but I really don't see it unless something goes wrong, like a drive shaft not working, for example. So we will have to, yeah, it's
Well,
that's the only thing that I can.
if it's
I
to
can
be
see really.
believed, the second half of the Saudi race was very, very, very difficult for both cars. So who knows? Maybe it's a bumpy track. It's a street track. It's an actual street track, unlike the Jeddah race. So there's every chance that it could be a little bit of a It's always quite attritional, to be honest, Melbourne. Not just because it's traditionally quite early. It is genuinely quite an attritional, quite a tricky balls close track. So there could be quite a few weird upsets. I don't know what you guys are doing, whether you guys are going to be staying up through the night. I probably won't be. So I might wake up on random, on like what's qualifying, and it'd be like, oh, this person's crashed in FP3 in the middle of the night for you. So who knows what's happening? That can always be quite exciting from a UK viewer perspective. Where it's just kind of like, oh, that's happened. Wow.
That is what I mean, especially when I was younger and it was easier to get up early because I wasn't as lazy and I went to bed earlier. Then I did really like that about F1. I mean, the kind of early season Australia, Malaysia, China, and you'd get up early and just like go downstairs, and like I just really liked that about early F1 when it was on terrestrial television as well, which obviously it isn't now. But yeah, I think for what do you think about Melbourne as well? Because the fan opinion, it's signed up to a long-term deal, but fan opinion does seem to have changed about it. I think it's with it losing the opening race of the season. It will. I think it's contracted to have, I think, 3 opening races of the season over the next 10 or 13 years. But fan opinion does seem to have.
I think it's 5 over the next 10. I thought.
Is it? Yeah, like the last Grand Prix was one of the worst of the season, and it's. Do you think it needs a good? Obviously, they made the change last season, which didn't seem to have too much of an effect, at least on the competitive running. Do you think it needs a good race to get back in? I guess F1 fans' good books.
I don't know. I from my side of it, I've been to the Grand Prix in Australia, and it was a fantastic event. The event there was really good, and that was pre-COVID and all of that. But it was pre the big Drive to Survive off. It was the first series of Drive to Survive came out about 2 days before I was there, so that wasn't a thing. But it was a massive, fantastic event anyway. Before that had all become ridiculous in the whole city. They always talk about this in commentary. The whole city embraces it, but it genuinely was insane how much Melbourne was an F1 city that weekend. And compared to other Grand Prix I've been to, the sort of stalwart ones like I was at Hungaroring and Budapest didn't really have the same feel at all, and things like that in ways that you'd have. I was quite surprised by. So I would say from that side of it, on the ground, if you're F1, you go to that event and you think, yeah, they're doing a fantastic job here. And that from that side of it, I think that definitely deserves to be there because it sets a bit of a standard for other races. So I do think probably you do maybe need a bit more an eventful race there. They made those changes last year, but I think that there wasn't really much chance to see them because of Charles Leclerc's phenomenal pace. There are sides of it, like that Saudi race the other time out was, that track has lots of ingredients for really good racing, but it was just the nature of where the cars were. So I think it could do with it with a bit more, with a few more classic races on the list, just because of the amount of time it's been there. But as an event, it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I've not been to the Australian Grand Prix, unfortunately, but I think Freddie is spot on. He has got that kind of fan love for it, and not many events do have that. Probably a third of the calendar, quarter of the calendar, maybe, I kind of have that fan engagement, I guess, with it. But I think what I can speak about is the track layout. For me, I can understand why they've made all these changes in terms of trying to create more overtaking, better racing, but the one change I'm not a fan of is getting rid of that turn 9-10 chicane, the right left, which is like the start of the second sector, I think, or just after the start of the second sector. I think now it's almost too much full throttle, I guess. It's not easy, obviously, but it just feels a bit, I don't know, it's kind of lost a technical bit, I guess. So I don't know. The track, it just, I don't know. It's just always been difficult to have racing on for some reason. And like Fred said, we've only seen it once with these new changes. But yeah, I can't help but feel there is something about it where it does lack that kind of excitement, I guess, which other races do have, and Melbourne doesn't.
Yeah, I can't speak for going there, but it always felt, regardless of how, whether the race was good or not, then it was the opening Grand Prix season. It was it was a safe bet for F1 really, but there was some good races, being a start of the season. If there were some retirements, some, being an attritional track as well, then there was that potential there. But I think with it not hosting the season opener since 2019 now, then it seems to have lost a bit of that, it doesn't matter if it's a bad race because F1's back vibe. So yeah, I think certainly for, when you see perennially WTF1 or whoever the race or whoever tweeting out, which track do you want to get rid of, which is your least favorite, which is your favorite, whatever, it is one that seems to come up a lot more from people who aren't going to the event. So I do think, I feel like it could do with, something like, a good race to come in, but I'm not sure whether that will happen. But is there anything else you would like to add on the Australian Grand Prix?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I am looking forward to it probably more than the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix just in general, because like what I've said, I think it's just a great, cool Grand Prix. And I think it's a fantastic place. So I am looking forward to it, and who knows where we'll be. And we're not going to have F1 for 4 weeks afterwards. So, Nigel's actually shedding a tear. I think it'll be nice to see, and I hope Oscar Piastri can continue his form that he showed at fits and starts in Saudi Arabia, because home race 3, no Ricardo, bit of pressure on his shoulders, so hopefully he can have a good one.
The Australians have never had good luck since Webber finished 5th in 2000 and what year was it? 1, 2? I can't remember.
2002.
2, yeah. Since then, they've always had bad luck. Like Webber's been involved in it, Ricardo's been disqualified, or being involved in incidents and stuff. It's always been bad for the last 21 years. So yeah, hopefully Piastri.
Well, the luck is points this time, so fingers crossed for Oscar, and then that brings a nice sort of a roundabout to our McLaren discussion earlier on as well.
Yeah, surely they can't have a worse weekend than Bahrain, surely. But we will have to wait and see, and we will be back.
I mean, imagine.
That's it. Bad thinking about, does it? Anyway, we shall. Hopefully, you watch the race, and hopefully, you are tuning in for our reaction podcast, which will be coming your way on Sunday. But in the meantime, it's time to say bye for now. Thanks very much for listening, and enjoy the race.
See you later, Australian accent.